Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Friday, September 6th, 2024, and you're listening to Alex's News. Riverside is in for a scorcher today, with temperatures soaring to a sweltering high of 113.5 degrees and only dropping to a low of 87 degrees. Please take precautions to stay cool and hydrated in this extreme heat. Coming up on today's episode, we'll dive into the August jobs report and its potential impact on both the economy and the upcoming election. We'll also explore President Biden's latest executive order and how it might transform federal projects across the nation. Finally, we'll take a fascinating look at the clever hunting techniques of humpback whales and how they manage to outsmart their prey. Stay tuned for these stories and more on Alex's News. We're turning now to a story that's capturing the nation's attention. The August 2024 jobs report is set to be released tomorrow, and it's expected to have far-reaching implications for both the economy and the presidential race. Joining us now with more details is our economic correspondent, Ethan. Ethan, what can you tell us about the expectations for this report?
Thanks, Grace. According to economists cited by AP News, we're looking at a potential addition of around 160,000 jobs in August. They're also predicting that the unemployment rate might dip slightly to 4.2% from July's 4.3%.
That sounds like a modest improvement. How significant is this report for the Federal Reserve's decision-making process?
It's incredibly significant, Grace. The Fed will be watching this report closely as they consider their next moves on interest rates. If the hiring numbers come in weak, similar to what we saw in July, the Fed might opt for a larger half percentage point rate cut to boost the economy. On the flip side, if hiring improves or unemployment falls, it could signal a more stable job market, potentially leading to a smaller quarter-point cut.
Interesting. Are there any other economic indicators we should be considering alongside this jobs report?
Absolutely. As reported by ABC News, we've seen mixed signals recently. There are fewer job openings and workers quitting for new opportunities. However, consumer spending rose at a healthy pace in July, and the economy grew at a solid 3% annual rate in the second quarter of this year.
That does sound mixed. What about the recent rise in unemployment? How is that being interpreted?
Well, Grace, it's important to note that the rise in unemployment over the past few months isn't necessarily due to widespread job cuts. According to KXAN Austin, an NBC affiliate, it's largely attributed to new entrants into the labor force, such as immigrants and recent college graduates.
I see. Now this report is coming out in the midst of a heated presidential race. How might it impact the political landscape?
The political implications are significant, Grace. A weak hiring report could potentially support former President Trump's claims of economic decline under the current administration. Conversely, a stronger report would bolster Vice President Harris's argument that the job market remains resilient despite inflation easing.
And what about the Federal Reserve's stance on all of this?
According to reporting from the Los Angeles Times, Fed Chair Jerome Powell has expressed a desire to prevent further weakening of the job market. This suggests that the Fed is now more focused on sustaining job market health than fighting inflation. We might get more insights later today when Christopher Waller, a member of the Fed's Board of Governors, is scheduled to discuss the economic outlook.
That's certainly a lot to consider. One last question, Ethan. How accurate are these predictions typically?
That's an important point, Grace. Historically, economists' predictions for monthly jobs reports have shown variable accuracy. Factors like sampling errors and anomalous data can lead to misjudgments. The COVID-19 pandemic has made predictions even more challenging by introducing unprecedented volatility into labor market data.
Well, it sounds like we'll all be watching tomorrow's report with great interest. Thank you for breaking this down for us, Ethan.
My pleasure, Grace.
And that was our economic correspondent, Ethan, with the first of our 3 top stories this morning. Stay tuned for more updates as we get closer to the release of the August 2024 jobs report. We turn now to a significant development in labor policy. President Biden is set to sign an executive order that could have far-reaching implications for workers across the country. For more on this, we're joined by our political correspondent, Chloe. Chloe, what can you tell us about this executive order?
Well, Grace, according to reporting from the Associated Press, President Biden is scheduled to sign this executive order on September 6th in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The order aims to prioritize federal grants for projects that include labor agreements, higher worker wages, and benefits such as access to childcare and apprenticeship programs.
That sounds like a potentially significant shift. Can you break down what this means in practical terms?
Certainly, Grace. The executive order essentially creates a preference for federal grant money to go towards projects that demonstrate strong labor standards and benefits. It also establishes a task force to coordinate policy development focused on enhancing worker benefits. The Biden administration argues that this approach can lead to better economic outcomes through increased efficiency and stability in federal contracting, as well as improved working conditions for workers.
Interesting. How does the administration justify this approach?
Well, Grace, the administration's stance, as reported by WTNH News 8, is that prioritizing these labor standards can lead to economic growth. Acting Labor Secretary Julie Su was quoted saying, "A good job is a job with security and benefits, where workers have the right to join a union, advocate for better working conditions, come home safe and healthy, and retire with dignity." The administration also points to $900 billion in private sector investments in renewable energy and manufacturing as evidence of the success of their incentives.
That's a substantial figure. How have labor unions responded to this?
Generally, labor unions have responded positively to Biden's pro-union policies. They see these executive orders as a strong endorsement of workers' rights and interests, and view them as a significant opportunity to increase their influence.
Are there any criticisms of this approach?
Yes, there are. Groups like the Associated Builders and Contractors, or ABC, argue that government-mandated project labor agreements can increase construction costs and discourage non-union contractors from bidding on projects. It's worth noting that the actual economic impact of these policies remains a subject of debate, as the empirical evidence supporting the administration's claims isn't extensively detailed in the sources available.
This seems to be happening in a broader political context. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely, Grace. This executive order comes as both President Biden and former President Trump are vying for support from organized labor in the lead-up to the upcoming elections. Vice President Kamala Harris, who's running against Trump, is specifically seeking support from unions like the AFL-CIO. The choice of Ann Arbor, Michigan, as the location for this announcement highlights the importance of organized labor in the upcoming elections.
Thank you, Chloe, for that comprehensive breakdown of this developing story. We'll be sure to keep our viewers updated as we learn more.
You're welcome, Grace. We'll certainly be watching closely as this executive order is signed and implemented.
Thanks again, Chloe. Now, let's move on to our next story. Here are some other headlines. Navy Secretary Carlos del Toro has been found to have violated the Hatch Act by making public statements endorsing President Biden's re-election and criticizing former President Trump during an official trip abroad. Del Toro self-reported the incident, but the U.S. Office of Special Counsel determined his comments crossed a legal boundary. Dr. Jacqueline Starrer, a 70-year-old physician from Massachusetts, has been sentenced to 9 months in prison for her role in the January 6th Capitol riot. Starrer pleaded guilty to assaulting a police officer and other charges related to entering the Capitol building. The European Union's Copernicus Climate Change Service has announced that summer 2024 was the hottest on record for the Northern Hemisphere. Global temperatures were 0.69 degrees Celsius above average, with June and August setting new monthly records. 2024 is now projected to become the warmest year ever recorded. A tragic shooting at Appalachia High School in Georgia has left 4 dead and 9 injured. The 14-year-old suspect, Colt Gray, opened fire during second period, killing 2 students and 2 adults before being apprehended. His father has also been arrested on related charges. A comprehensive database tracking mass killings in the U.S. since 2006 reveals an average of 30 such incidents per year. The analysis shows most are committed by men using firearms, with family-related incidents more common than public mass shootings. 2023 saw a record high of 38 mass killings. We're continuing our morning news with a fascinating story about the incredible feeding behavior of humpback whales. Joining us to discuss this is our marine science correspondent, Ethan. Ethan, can you tell us more about this unique feeding technique?
Certainly, Grace. Humpback whales have developed a sophisticated feeding behavior known as bubble net feeding. This complex technique showcases the species' intelligence and ability to manipulate their environment for efficient hunting.
That sounds intriguing. How exactly does bubble net feeding work?
Well, Grace, the whales create cylindrical barriers of bubbles to trap their prey, such as krill or small fish. They do this by swimming in circular motions and releasing bubbles from their blowholes. What's fascinating is the precision and structure of these bubble nets. They're not random formations, but carefully choreographed behaviors that the whales customize based on their target prey.
That's remarkable. Are there different techniques for different types of prey?
Yes, there are. For instance, when feeding on krill, the whales create nested rings within the net to compress the krill into a smaller area, making it easier to consume. When targeting faster-moving prey like herring, humpbacks often engage in collaborative hunting. One whale releases a large bubble net, while another emits a feeding call to signal the others to lunge upward simultaneously, scooping up the fish with their wide-open mouths.
It sounds like this behavior requires a lot of coordination. How do scientists study this?
According to marine biologists, they've been able to study this behavior in detail using specialized suction cup cameras and drones. These tools provide unprecedented insights into the whale's underwater activities, including the precise patterns of bubble release and the whale's movements.
That's incredible technology. Is this feeding behavior something the whales are born knowing how to do?
Actually, it's not instinctual. Young humpback whales acquire this skill through social learning, observing, and participating with experienced whales in their social groups. The complexity of the technique implies that it requires significant practice and learning to master, which underscores the importance of social learning and suggests that humpback whales possess advanced cognitive abilities.
That's fascinating. Is this behavior seen in all humpback whale populations around the world?
Not exactly, Grace. It's well documented in Northern Hemisphere populations, particularly in areas such as Alaska and Southeast Alaska. In the Southern Hemisphere, it has been observed more recently, including off the coast of New South Wales and Tasmania in Australia. The behavior seems to be more prevalent in certain migratory routes and feeding grounds, suggesting that it may be culturally transmitted within specific groups.
With climate change affecting so many aspects of our world, has it had any impact on this feeding behavior?
Yes, it has. Rising ocean temperatures are leading to shifts in the distribution and abundance of prey species, forcing humpback whales to adjust their feeding grounds and migration patterns. These changes can lead to increased competition for resources and potentially impact their reproductive success. The disruption of marine ecosystems due to climate change can also lead to nutritional stress for humpback whales, affecting their overall health and survival.
That's concerning. Is this feeding technique unique to humpback whales, or do other marine species use similar methods?
While other marine species may exhibit cooperative feeding behaviors, the specific technique of bubble net feeding, involving the creation of a net of bubbles to corral and trap prey, is not commonly seen in other species. This makes bubble net feeding a distinctive and advanced feeding strategy unique to humpback whales, further highlighting their remarkable adaptability and intelligence in the marine ecosystem.
Thank you, Ethan, for sharing this fascinating information about humpback whales and their unique feeding behavior. It's truly amazing what we continue to learn about these magnificent creatures.
You're welcome, Grace. It's always a pleasure to discuss the wonders of marine life.
And that concludes our final story for this morning's news. Thank you for joining us and have a great day. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 3.5, the Perplexity API, and the Google Cloud Text-to-Speech API. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.